Listen, in the fullness of time, let's start with the title. I'll just say this is an amazing book because it covers about 100 years of time in a short space. Because you've got this narrative of ancestors immigrating into America, leaving behind Central Europe, but then the Second World War in Central Europe sort of brings these two groups, more than two groups together. There's themes of obviously war and violence and trauma and identity, and there's so much going on in this book. We've got a lot to talk about. Tell me first where you got the title from.
Well, it's from scripture. It's both in it appears in both testaments. Um, and they have different interpretations. Uh, and my father was Jewish. My mother was Catholic, and my brother and I were raised as Catholics. I guess it was part of the bargain. And it, I never heard it until about, yeah, geez, till I start actually really getting into the book, and it just struck me. There is a continuum in life and in history, and the question is always been for everyone: where does it all lead? Well, it leads to the fullness of time. And it's funny, I didn't really get seriously into writing this book till I lost my son, and I realized how alike my father and my son were. Both very sensitive people, both very tough people. Both were smarter than I. And the title kind of symbolized for me some way, some vague, remote way of connecting dots. And it was an easy pick when I finally arrived at it. Usually my stuff I write, and I don't write novels, but it's the last thing I put on a book.
Yeah.
The title. This one was sort of a guide.
Yeah, I think that's true for me too. I think the title emerges during the writing of the book. It becomes obvious during the writing of the book as you settle with um, your own understanding of what you're delivering. There are some tough themes in the book, some traumatic themes, I'll say, and you're brave to tackle them, and you're brave to refer to your own life experiences as as grounding that. Um, so let's talk. Let's. I think we should talk about both time and the traumatic themes that you cover. There's many of them, not just war. Let's begin with time because there's a in a short novel you've got an awfully long breadth of time from the 1920s to essentially present day, where there's a professor who is reflecting on the image that you and I have behind us. He discovers it at Carlisle at the Army War College. So there's this present time where there's a professor discovering his history, but the novel begins in the 1920s with a traumatic event, by the way. Why don't you talk about that?
Uh, the liberation of Belsen. Yeah. It Part of the one climax in the book was, and this is based on family history, was when my father, who was at the front, um, and I got a letter from his mother telling him that his cousin uh, was at Belsen. By then, the British liberated it, and my father was with the First Army, and so they were under most of the time they were under Montgomery's command. And he gets this letter that his cousin is at Belsen. By then, Belsen had be a, uh, a DP camp, so there were a lot of displaced persons there. Don't have a lot of history because of, I guess, the trauma involved. But he met her, and of course, they were first cousins. They'd lived near each other in Warsaw. He left Poland when it was 1920, and now he returns. And there's a vis-a-vis of two people whose lives are entangled through blood, through history, but in one way they were both victims, but one, but they're on opposite sides of the fence. One's a an internee, and the other one is a conqueror. And the thing that made him a conqueror was the fact, basically, that he was an American. He fought with the Allies. It made all the difference in his life. And she did eventually move to Los Angeles. And I asked my aunt if I could drop by and see her, and she said, "No, just stay away. It would bring up too many harsh memories, and it would drive her and myself," she claimed, crazy. So I never got to I never got to relive that encounter.
Your novel ties together these different ancestries and different life trajectories across different points of time. So you begin with Belsa, and then chronologically, the chapter that is set furthest back in time is actually the second chapter. So that's Warsaw, 1921, which has a traumatic event in it. So why don't you tell us about that one?
Uh, well, the Warsaw Uprising was a
Well, hang on. Wait, 21. So
oh,
your second
21.
chapter is
Oh,
21. We got the Warsaw Rising too, which is
okay, right.
44, and you cover that
Oh,
brilliantly too. And I want to talk about that, but yeah, chapter 2, 1921,
right. I'm sorry. I got lost.
the railway station.
Right. That's another event that of a story that was brought back from Poland. How a might have been an Hasidic Jew, but anyhow, it was a Jew with a long beard who was at the railway station in Warsaw, and I remember the story being retold to me how some thugs grabbed him and cut off his beard with shears, but they took chunks of flesh along with it. And I know from the retelling that how upset the household was, my family household, that this event was. These events were going on sporadically in 1921 throughout Poland. Poland had a very mixed population at the time, and as a result of their victory over Russia or USSR, they were entitled to take more territory if they wanted, but they couldn't handle the various diaspora they already had within their current borders, and of course that gave rise to a lot of political movements, a lot of fringe people, fringe politicians, and fringe politics, and it just sent the country into chaos. And it was that year that my my father's parents decided to come to America to rejoin their family that was already settled here. They had been here since 1906, starting with my grandfather.
Yeah, so chapter 3 is entitled Steerage, and that's about the emigration into America of these Poles, and they meet various other immigrants on their steerage. And then chapter 4, you jump straight to the Warsaw Uprising. So explain why you did that.
Uh, well, that was a tremendous heroic event. Uh, the Poles were only supposed to uh, last for about a week because the Red Army was parked on the other side of the Vistula. And they were duped by Stalin, who wanted to erase them as well. not just Hitler wanted to erase them, but they were duped by Stalin and say, put them on their back heels, and then we'll join the fight in about a week or 10 days once they're on the defense. But of course, as we all know, the Russians never took a step, and the Poles were left without ammunition, without food, without any kind of support. And they held out for almost 60 days. In fact, it was so heroic that even the Germans, at their surrender, saluted them as they crawled out of the gutters. And the Wehrmacht saluted them, but then the Nazis swept in and distributed them to various concentration camps, where most of them perished. Of course, obviously, that day is always remembered in Poland, the beginning of the uprising, August 1st, which is in this week. And at least the city of Warsaw comes to a stop. It's a very moving, moment. One of my goals is to be there on that day, to see what it's like, because it kind of describes Poland's, abandonment in the war. And of course, they were abandoned after the war as well.
Well, I remember when I first reviewed your book, and particularly that chapter, I remember saying how impressed I was that you, through fiction, you took us inside the Warsaw Uprising, which is a more profound event to take us inside because it's so badly documented, because the participants, mostly dead,
Right.
were not there were no propaganda units to film or photograph what was going on, apart from a few on the German side. And obviously, both the Soviets and the German sides at the time were unwilling to document everything that was going on. So you took us inside that. And in fact, I remember one of the characters dies. You have sort of a first person, you have a first person perspective of this character, and then surprisingly that character dies, which is very unconventional in fiction. First person characters, the reader normally expects them to survive, keep the narrative going. So I remember that chapter was one of the most profound for me. There's a lot of interesting structural choices in this novel, including that the Warsaw chapter begins. There's most of the chapters, the subsequent chapters, are essentially chronological, although they jump from the west to the east and into Germany. So you go into 1945, and Belsen and the Hürtgen Forest and all that. So, but before we get to those things, just explain your structural choices here, which are very interesting.
Well, let's talk about the death of Beryl, who's a Polish Jew who was able to escape the Jewish uprising, which occurred months earlier, and made it over to the Aryan side, they used to refer to, and took up fighting with the Poles. And his death, it's sort of a personal story too. I was able to draw it out because I was one of the last persons to see my father alive. He was in the hospital and he was recovering from a heart attack. And then I went home that night, and about 6 a.m, I got this tremendous pain in my heart. And I was sure I was going to die. I had the sensation of dying. And I remember thinking, how ironic, I'm going to die. And it's my father who's the heart attack, who's the one with who's being hospitalized for heart disease. And I felt, life slipping out of my body, and the blood, being pumped out. And it was at that time, excuse me, my father was actually dying. I was feeling this simultaneously. A few minutes later, when I came to, I fell into a very, very deep sleep, deepest sleep I've ever known in my life. And then I woke up as if I was expecting a phone call, and the phone call came. And it was the hospital letting me know, the family doctor letting me know that my father had died. And it all had been in a span of about 20 minutes. So I was able to connect with my character's death because of that experience. I was able to flesh out some of the details because there are still accounts of the ghetto uprising and the Warsaw uprising as well that I was able to draw from to paint the background and to color in some of the holes. But yeah, oddly, I don't think about it much, but that was a sort of a personal experience.
Yeah, well, you're very brave to go back to a personal experience like that, and, and your writing is very brave, much braver than mine.
Cool.
Um, so,
Let me
so
say, you are a better writer than I, because when we collaborate, I always defer to your words.
well, well, thank you. We'll get into that another time, I think. Um, uh, so structurally, you go from the Warsaw Uprising, you continue through the winter of 44, 45. So the uprising is essentially in the fall or autumn of 44. And you jump to Hürtgen Forest. So explain, so Hürtgen Forest and this medical event, this truce for medical treatment by both sides in the Hürtgen Forest is the core of the novel because it then grounds this later on in time, this professor's discovery of this mystery of what happened through the picture that is behind me and behind you. So Hürtgen Forest, why did you go to Hürtgen Forest? Explain the motivation for that.
Well, that's where my father served, and they were uh, uh, they were sort of at the spearhead uh, of the attack on Germany. In fact, I didn't learn this till somebody told me. My father was in the 78th Infantry Division, and there's an interstate highway that runs from New Jersey all the way down to South and North Carolina called Route 78. It was named after my father's division. And I remember, obviously, veterans don't talk much about the war. But as a kid, I get snippets. And he didn't talk much about Hürtgen Forest. Uh, I had to find out war stories by doing research, but uh, my father was never a flag waver. He didn't see the point of it. He didn't put his religion or his patriotism on his sleeve. But I remember one day when I was a kid, one of the movies that came out was The Battle of the Bulge. And I asked him once if he was at the Battle of the Bulge, because everybody in the Battle of the Bulge seemed to be a hero, and at least from the American side. And it was that in D-Day is, it's fixed in the American and psyche is, this is what we're made out of. And I remember he's telling me about like he was in the northern shoulder of the bulge of the salient, and they were already in Germany. And I remember when I was just about 8 or 9 years old, I said, "Dad, were you in the bulge?" He didn't even look up to me. He just was looking down at his papers, and he said, "No, we held." And that was the attitude that I took with me, and he took with him as far as the front. But Hürtgen Forest was a meat grinder. It was a mistake. It showed the incompetence at times of Central Command. It was an unnecessary battle, and yet we just kept pouring people into this abattoir to the point where the Germans were. I think the kill ratio is 3-1 in favor of the Germans. My father's unit, his regiment, suffered 100% casualties, And I've read that among the officers, the casualty rate was 150%. Now, I remember from my own military training, it was if your unit suffers about 20% casualties, you're taken off the line because you've been basically, uh, you know, been made, uh, you've been neutralized and you have to be refreshed. They didn't take anybody off the line. Uh, they just fed more and more fodder. And, Americans were walking over pillboxes and foxholes that were occupied by Germans and had no idea. And one statistic I heard, it was the battle where more men were shot in the back than any other battles of World War II because nobody knew where they were. And there's plenty of bloody details that I had to find out for myself. And actually, when I was asked to say, I came across this picture when I was asked to speak at the Army War College in Carlisle, and they put me in a room. It's a nice spacious suite of rooms. It's mentioned in the book, and above the desk was this very picture, which is a picture of the truce at Hürtgen Forest, where my father was a triage officer. And it gave me more inspiration for the book. It started to set scenes into place, and I started seeing the collage come together into a story.
So let's talk about that truce because it is so central. It's a bit mysterious in the novel, to at least from the professor's perspective, looking back from the present day. But you take us there in some of the chapters, the middle chapters, you take us there from both the American and German sides, which I found very exciting, because you rarely get a two-sided view, certainly not from the first person of battle or war. So it was very profound, and it explicitly anchors the novel as a whole because of the overarching narrative. So, can you explain how you describe the story of that truce in the novel?
Well, um, we always had in our house a German medical field kit. And I didn't know it was German. I thought, I just saw it and didn't pay much attention to it. And then when my brother left for medical school, my father made a gift of this medical field kit to him. And I found out not only why I was writing the book, where he got it. It was a memento from a German doctor who he helped uh, at the truce, uh, to administer to the wounded. Uh, this was an unofficial truce. Most truces we don't know about. This was hard to research. There were plenty of truces, official truces in World War One, but World War Two, there were no official truces. Maybe one or two. Uh, this one I had to piece together uh, just by doing the research, and it was a point where both sides came together uh, and realized that despite the animosity and the hatred that had been welled up in them, they were both victims. And out of that victimhood, I think there was a brotherhood, a strange, eerie brotherhood that I stayed with them for the rest of their lives. I'm sure. Uh, you know, uh, there is a story. My brother actually went back to the town of Aachen, which was right in the center of Hürtgen Forest, and he met a guy who tried to have a reunion of American soldiers and German soldiers who fought. And these done, you could tell me better than I know, Bruce, that they had these reunions all over Europe between the British and the Germans. At least that's what I always thought. That's what I was told. He said he tried it one year and he just abandoned it because the Americans came over. Now these are men in their 50s and their 60s, came over and it erupted. The banquet erupted into a fight. A lot of these were Rangers. They had traveled, assumed from California in their 60s to come to Aachen, and they said it was mostly these American Rangers who just couldn't let it go. A lot of they took a lot of casualties at Aachen, and they were faced with impossible missions. And he tried it once, and that was the end of it. And that struck me. And I don't know if that's an American thing or that's a war thing, or or just a cultural thing. But that war, I mean, it was ghastly. And the snippets and the accounts they talk about where the Germans put piano wire in between the trees to cut off the heads of Americans driving in tanks, not in tanks, in jeeps, and what the Americans did to the Germans. Again, it was an insanity that that I don't know how you overcome. And all the stories are not, that I wrote about, and there's plenty of them, too many to go through, but they're all based on real accounts. And I have to admit they are gruesome. I mean, I don't, I don't recommend this. I never recommended this book to any of the women members of my family, and I'm sure they wouldn't get very far in it. But you know, there's certain things you just can't gloss over. Then it's not truthful.
Yeah. Well, your research is tremendous, and you just go back to what was implicit in what you're just saying. Your account is very balanced because it does acknowledge atrocities on both sides, and there's an under documented history of Western atrocities, Western Allied forces as they entered Germany,
Yeah.
and you capture some of that in the narrative. So it's very balanced. And it's realistic. It's authentic. You like I say, your research is tremendous. So I commend you the what you achieve emotionally and historically in the center, very center of the book is what very many fiction writers attempt to do but don't achieve it, which is to anchor the novel in an event. And you do that with you set out to do that. It anchors the trajectory of these emigrants and their descendants to the Second World War, and it anchors the professor at Carlisle looking back towards the Second World War. So you achieve that. It's a very common attempt in fiction writing, but very few people achieve it. So well done to you, sir.
Well, I didn't want to moralize in the book because I'm in no position to moralize. I think the point was we're all frail one way or another, no matter how we act or how we think uh, our self-image. We all have this frailty, and and we won't know, according to Scripture, uh, what it all means until the fullness of time, and which in itself, of course, is a very vague statement. So uh, the point at the end was, I guess, uh, opaqueness is something that is part of life, and we hope to find our own moral compass within ourselves to get us through.
Yeah, yeah. Well said, sir. Well, it's a brave and well researched and fascinating book. I enjoyed it a lot. In fact, I've read it more than once, and I very rarely say that.
Thank you.
So well done, sir.
Well, thank you, Bruce, and thanks for being the sounding board for this. And I at the very least, I'll leave something behind for my family, for my friends, and anybody who wants to read a novel that's also a history. It's a historical novel. I mean, it's a simple category, but it's short. But I didn't see the need to blow it out more than the mere 100 and some odd pages that's in it. I want it to be concise, and
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't even.
it's short. It's short, but there's so much going on. You're jumping between times and space across the world, across a century of time. It's amazing how you do that.